I'm going to talk about a little bit about my life. It's a little bit different than the other presenters here tonight. Because it started at a very young age. From Massachusetts, I still park my car. And my mom and dad had a second grade education. We lived in an Italian neighborhood, and my mom was Italian. And we never had anything in our lives, in our early lives, that we could actually point to and say, well, this was a joy to have a piece of cake, because we didn't. Basically, my mom did great work. They're both laborers. She kind of put food on the table. We had clean clothes. It was my brother and my sister and myself. And, of course, my mom and dad, which were great people. However, at the age of 7, I was diagnosed with a heart murmur. And on that, I had rheumatic fever. So I ended up in bed. Couldn't afford the hospital. So I ended up in bed with my mom's home and my mom and dad's home where I grew up. And I was in bed for 1 year. And on that 1 year anniversary, they had a procession from the local church. My mom and dad and our family were very religious. And the procession ran down on this hill. We never owned a car, obviously, and never had a TV and all those good things. But my dad carried me down there to St. Anthony's Festival. St. Anthony came by. And my mother took $1. And they had ribbons on St. Anthony. And you could go and get St. Anthony and they would pin the ribbon on there. And we said a little prayer. 6 months later, I get up out of bed. I didn't have a heart murmur. It was gone, outgrew it. My rheumatic fever was gone. I went on with life. I played sports. I was in the military. I did a lot of neat things, I'll tell you. So right away, I had God on my side. However, in the course of growing up, and I'll get to my career in a second, in the course of growing up, I want to skip ahead to my service days. I was supposed to be in for 3 years. I got extended to 4.5. I was deployed 3 times, in and out in different places. I met my lovely wife. Knew her for 5 days. I asked her, I didn't want to get married. I asked her, we're in Rome. I was on a holiday, and she was from New York. I asked her to get married. Shocked. She said yes. So she had to go back. I didn't see her for 6 months. After this, we wrote letters back and forth in some areas. We'd get 30 letters at a time. Back and forth. And what happened was that I went to visit her mom and her sister and so forth. And here I show up at the door. And her mom and her sister greet me. Now, at this point, I was in an outfit that was pretty rough. I just lived out in the field sometimes, 60 days without showers. And it was kind of tough going at times. But there were some benefits to this whole thing. And so going back, I know she couldn't go back with me. But I thought, God sent her to me for some reason. I didn't have any social graces at that time. They were all God, believe me. So I went back and I didn't see her for we're going back. We decided to get married in a church. Her sister, with a judge. Her sister and was the witness there. We got married in a church. But my parents and her parents didn't believe this was marriage. So I lived in a YMCA for the next day because I had to go back, and she lived with her mother. So I went back for a period of time, I don't know, Jeanette, maybe 7 months, 8 months. Came back. Again, I was staying in the YMCA, but Jeanette had already planned out a church wedding. So we finally got married in the church, and I got the blessing. But in my days with the military, I had a higher, it's hard to believe, a higher clearance than a top secret, because some of the things that was involved. And basically, when I got discharged out of the military, State Department wanted me to be a diplomatic courier. They still do it today, by the way. Even with all the great technology, you still go on a plane with handcuffs, and you go to an embassy, and you change pouches, and you come back with a pouch. You never know what's in them. Could be somebody's life, for all you know. But and I accepted the job. And so we had to move to Washington, D.C. Moved to Washington, D.C. Come to find out, the job wasn't open until for another 9 to 10 months. They had limits on how many they could have. But it was hiring, but 9 to 10 months. So I had to live somehow, so I joined this company, and it happened to be 3M company. And my first job with them was account PR person. You know, and I would go through the accounts to make sure they were happy with the company and any problems they had. We dealt with microfilm at that time, and copiers and overhead projectors, and all those good things. And from that point, that's when my career started. So here's my story about that. In my career, we moved 7 times. In all 7 places, we built a church. So my calling seems to be, we had a pastor. So that's what my calling is, to build a church. Now it's like I want to build a cathedral. So we did that, and we took our children with us. We had a boy and a girl, and it was tougher on them than probably on myself, and tougher on my wife, because we had to pick up, move to another place, pick up, move to another place. But somehow the children grew up and became very worldly, because they saw so many different things all over the United States. They weren't just honed into one area. They saw the good, the bad, and the different. And the same thing with the churches we belong to, by the way. Saw the good, the bad, and the different churches. But as we moved through my career, I always wanted to be a national sales manager. These guys, they did everything right. You know, they dressed well, they had people, they visited accounts. I always wanted to do that. Well, that was my goal in life, to do that. So one day I get a call, went and got an interview in St. Paul, where we were based at, and I visited with the vice executive VP. He said to me, he said, "Well, we'd like you to be national sales manager of this division." Oh God, this is the greatest thing. I'll take it. And we didn't talk about anything else. Got on that plane that night. I was feeling really great. But in that interim time, my daughter was moving from Texas, which we were years ago, to live back to home. Kids come back home and live. And she was having some difficulties in life. And I got home and I was so happy. I talked to my wife, Jeanette. I said, "Jeanette, guess what? I'm finding it. We're going to go to St. Paul. I'm going to be this." She just looked at me as a good wife. She said, "Yes, Paul, that's something you always wanted." But then that night, I get up out of bed at 9 o'clock, and I could not sleep. What bothered me was that I was going to leave, and here's my daughter with some problems, and I was going to leave and move again. And I just couldn't do it. All night long, and I asked God, I said, "God, you've got to give me some direction here. How can I do this? How can I back out of this? Because the next day they're going to announce it." So at 5 o'clock in the morning, which was 8 o'clock 7 o'clock that time in St. Paul, I called this VP at home. And I said, "I'm not taking the job." He couldn't believe it, by the way. He says, "What are we going to do?" I said, "I just can't take it." I said, "I got reasons." He says, "Could you share those reasons?" I shared them. He says, "You know what? You made the right decision." He was a nice guy. And since then, I always relished it. But in any event, as life went on, I did get back to St. Paul, had many assignments in marketing, different divisions. I learned a lot. I did some training for the company also. We had an MBA program, which we would interview MBAs and try to hire as many as we could to stockpile. Didn't have jobs at that time. I know big business today gets a knock, but there's some good things that big business does. And the company I worked for is $25 billion, over 100,000 employees. This was kind of different itself. But the campus I worked on was 18,000 employees. It was like, my God, a guy from Massachusetts going through the stages of life. By this time, my wife has finally got me settled down. She's got my social graces back. So I didn't embarrass anybody during dinner. But in any event, I always kept a soft spot in my heart for the people that no one sees. They always do something in the background. And And I always had my door, I would stay there sometimes at 7 o'clock at night, and the cleaning people would come over, and I'd call them in my office and sit down and talk to them. Talk about life and about their families and all. It was the greatest feeling at the end of the night. He could not believe that someone took time to do that. And as I moved up the ladder and got in the corner office, holy smokes, these guys would come in and they'd be shaking a little bit. And I would just sit down, because they never at that level ever even said anything. They would even acknowledge that. Even though it's a good company, it's a big company. And I started, when I finally took a division over, I started a pizza party for all the little people. And I would invite them all to this pizza party, to the point where they would call my secretary and say, gee, Paul Sampson invited me to this. I'm going to have to check with my supervisor to see if I could go. It was around the holidays, and they really enjoyed that. But moving ahead, I got to be a general manager of a division with 4,600 employees, $1.8 billion business, a global business. We were in 26 countries, and it was a big job. And again, I went to God, and I said, I don't know if I can handle this. Number one, I don't have the background to do this, but they have the faith in to give me this job. So I had to go to Him many, many times, like many of you have to go to God every so often and ask Him for your help and assistance to get me through this. One of the areas I want to talk about in this job was that we had a plant in Mexico. Hard-working people, like a lot of major corporations, they have a plant right on the other side of El Paso. And in that plant, these people earned a good wage, and usually the husband or mother worked there, and they came miles and miles to live there by themselves and get the money, and they would bring it back. And one of the things that I noticed was that, they were separated from their families and so forth, but I instituted a program where they gave health care. So 2 times a week, they could bring their family to a doctor and a nurse in the manufacturing plant, and he and she would try to help them in their health problems. And I'll tell you what, if I could walk on water, I walked on water with these people, because they never had, some have never been to a doctor, which is unbelievable in today's day and age. So that was one of the inspirations that were given to me by God. He told me, you got to do something for these people, and I did. Since I retired, I've devoted myself to helping others. I'm involved heavily with the Pastoral Council. I'm on the school board here. I'm involved in many, many organizations with the Marine Corps down there, the Marine Corps Hospital, returning vets. So I really feel as though that's my calling, is to help those other people that I'm looking for a word here, that just did not have the opportunities I did in life, I guess I put that way. So again, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Very good. Thank you.
No, Paul, did folks know you were a Catholic at 3M?
Yes. Matter of fact, we would have a prayer service, a breakfast every month, once a month we had it. And it was non-denominational. But every month they highlighted a religious person, myself being Catholic, to get in front of the group. And we would have an audience of maybe 200 or 300 employees on campus. And I would talk about some of the things that we have done in our religious. Yeah. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.